Welcome inside episode 597 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Pillar, up in the Blue Mountains. Ross Levitan still away on vacation, and the Sens scouting staff were able to take a vacation on day one of the draft as they traded 7th overall pick in a package to acquire Alex DeBrincat. But it was no vacation on day two as they made 9 total selections from the final pick in the second round all the way to the end of the draft. Lots of intriguing prospects being brought into the organization. So I'm going to give my reaction to all of the picks made by the Ottawa Senators from the second round on to the end of the draft. Let's get into today's episode of the Locked On Senators podcast. Here we go.
Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Today is Friday, July 8th. Thank you for making the Locked On Senators podcast your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all audio podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you download your podcast, you can find us. And hey, you can watch us on YouTube. And if you want to help the channel grow, the easiest ways to do that is hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe, and tell your friends all about the Locked On Senators podcast as the draft is finally over. The Locked On Senators podcast, Ross and I have covered this extensively. We did a top 64 prospect profiles. We did a 4-hour-long mock draft. We've done countless interviews with prospect analysts, including Scott Wheeler, Tony Ferrari, Chris Peters, Corey Pronman, David St. Louis. The list can go on, and there was lots of other guys that joined us in the mock draft to give their insight on some of these prospects. And day two was very interesting as far as I'm concerned, and they were moving quickly. Now, the last couple drafts moved a lot slower because things needed to be done more virtually than in the past. And today, they weren't having any wasted time. It was, okay, make your pick, get off, next team, make your pick. And things were moving quickly. I think even the Sportsnet crew and all the TV analysts were having a hard time keeping up and getting into the flow of things because they're used to having a little bit more time to really profile some of these guys, especially the higher guys up at the top of the second round. But that's not where the Ottawa Senators were picking, as they trade the 7th overall pick and the 39th pick to and a 2024 third round pick. Don't forget that big part of the deal, to acquire Alex DeBrincat from the Chicago Blackhawks. Like we talked about, I don't think the scouts were too upset giving a 7th overall and a 39th overall in, I don't want to call it a super weak draft class, but definitely widely viewed as a weaker draft class to get a 40-plus goal scorer in his prime. The scouts were not too worried about that, and they had their opportunities for the rest of the draft. As I mentioned, they made 9 selections, and the first one starting at pick 64th overall, the final pick in the second round. And the Ottawa Senators do something very predictable as far as the Sens go. They pick a big left-hand shot Swedish defenseman in Filip Nordberg. And this is someone that we did not cover in our top 64. It would have been nice if he was the final 64th guy we covered, and that would wrap things up easily. But there's a lot to like about this kid, that's for sure. I don't think Sens fans need to be disappointed with the first pick of the 2022 draft made by this team, because he's 6'4", 207 pounds. So he's got that pro frame already. You know the Sens love that. And with his team in the J20 League, I'm going to try to pronounce this, but I'm going to butcher it, Södertälje, with the SKJ20 national team. He played 42 games, 6 goals, 21 assists, good for 27 points. And he even got to spend some time in the Allsvenskan League. He had 9 games there, although he had no points playing there. What scouts are saying and what I'm learning about this guy is he has good straight line skating speed, which when you're a defenseman, that's good to have when you're trying to lead the rush out of the neutral zone and out of your own end. You can just blow by guys. He's a two-way defenseman that excels more defensively, though, but he can still make good passes under pressure, according to EP. So it's not like he's just a complete shutdown defenseman. He uses his size to shut down attackers, and he has solid defensive awareness. So clearly, those are the things that the Sens covet with a big left shot defenseman. He boxes out in front of the net with the best of them. We know Dorian loves that, as he famously said when they brought in Eric Goodbranson. Hey, he cross-checks guys in the back, and players don't like that. So having Filip Nordberg be able to do that, that's something that definitely the Senators brass would like. EP scout Jimmy Hamrin, he actually scouted a couple of the Sens players in EP's guide. He mentions he played regular third pair minutes in the Allsvenskan League and even saw some penalty killing time. So in the upper league, he was on a bottom pair, but seeing some time on the penalty kill for a young kid is pretty decent. And then he played top pair minutes in J20 and in all important situations. So this is a guy that it's going to be interesting to see where he plays next season. Hopefully, he can get some time playing in the Allsvenskan League. I'm not sure where he's going to play. It looks like, according to EP, it's going to be J20 National again. But he's already done pretty well there, and he could definitely use some more time to hone his skills there. He does have some work to do with his lateral skating and mobility, it seems like. So that's something that all young defensemen, if you're going to be playing big minutes, you have to be a good skater if you're going to have an impact in the pro game. That's for sure. He has a hard point shot and he's able to wait for open lanes. So I think that is kind of a nod to how he is a two-way defenseman. He's able to get the puck towards the net, and he's not just going to be taking kind of mindless slap shots at guys' knee pads or shin pads, and it's bouncing off into the corners or going wide and creating a turnover. So that's definitely something good to note for Nordberg. I feel like this is a safer pick, right? A classic Sens, like I said, good size, good defensive game, along with puck moving skills and some skating upside with his top speed. I think he kind of projects to be a number 4 defenseman. Now, what I mean by that is he'll play on a second pair, but he might be the lesser of the two on that second pair, and he's going to be the guy that's being more responsible and allowing someone on that right side to be a little bit more risky in an offensive role, joining the rush, trying to create offense while Nordberg is able to stay back and really try to play a good, responsible game. So overall, I like the Filip Nordberg pick. Do I love it? No, especially when we look at some of the guys that Ross and I covered. Like when you're looking at the draft, Lane Hudson went to the Habs a few picks before. As you guys know, Ross was very high on Lane Hudson. He loved the skill that he brought, even as a smaller player. He's so shifty and dynamic with the puck. There's a lot of reasons to like him, but he was off the board. Actually, the Habs drafted a couple of Ross's favorite guys, Owen Beck as well, and we both like Slavkovsky. Probably not at first overall, but still, those are some good players that Ross is going to have to learn not to cheer for anymore. You guys probably know where I'm going with this. My guy, Ty Nelson, was still available here. I was banging on the table. I was tweeting out they better take him because the value of a guy like Ty Nelson, yeah, sure, he's a little bit shorter, but he's got that stocky build. He's right around 200 pounds for a guy that was like 5'10", so he's strong. He had good offensive upside, and he's a right-hand shot defenseman, whereas Nordberg is a left shot. There's definitely a premium for the right shot guy, so I thought that would have been much better value than Nordberg here, but it's very not surprising at all that the Senators went this route instead of swinging on a guy with offensive upside. So overall, if you guys followed along with our prospect profiles, we did a rating out of 5 stars for the Sens fit and how we feel about these prospects. I gave Filip Nordberg, after doing some research on him, 3.5 stars because I see the benefits. I see the size, 6'4", 207 pounds. Hard not to like that. And I think he's going to have some good opportunities to grow over in Sweden. And there's some things that definitely make him a safer pick that I can see him progressing over in Europe and then maybe coming over and starting things off in the AHL a couple years down the road. So for Filip Nordberg, 3.5 stars for me. I like the pick. As I mentioned, I think they really missed not taking Ty Nelson, especially when he goes only a couple picks after. Seattle, like they did with Shane Wright, was probably running up to make their pick because that's a guy you cannot allow to slip any further in Ty Nelson. So Not a bad start for the Ottawa Senators. At least I wasn't enraged with the pick, because sometimes when you're a fan of the Ottawa Senators and you cover drafts and prospects like Ross and I do, it can baffle you when you look at the value they leave on the table. And sometimes it seems like a reach, where I wouldn't say this was too much of a reach, that's for sure. Now moving on to their next pick, third round, 72nd overall pick, Oskar Pettersson. I'm not sure if it's Peterson or Pettersson. I'm going to go with Peterson for now. And he's an 18-year-old player, 6'2", 198 pounds. Are seeing a trend here above 6 feet and right around 200 pounds. That's the Sens way. Hey, I don't knock it. I like picking guys with size, that's for sure. He's a right-hand shot right winger, and he was playing in Rögle over in Sweden. Now, my kind of guess here is that the Sens, and I tweeted out famously that the Senators were going to select Marco Kasper with the 7th overall pick. As you guys may know, Marco Kasper did play with Rögle over in Sweden, and minutes later, after I tweeted that out on Twitter at BrandonPillar1, the Senators traded the 7th overall selection. It was pretty funny because I was very sure they were going to keep the pick after the Matt Murray trade rumors were squashed. I was like, okay, if that's the direction they're going with 7th overall, just keep it and take a guy like Marco Kasper, who went to the Detroit Red Wings not far after, where the Ottawa Senators could have selected him at 7th overall. So getting back to Oskar Pettersson, I believe that they probably got a lot of viewings of him when they were checking out Marco Kasper with Rögle. And he's been with Rögle for quite a long time. Pettersson, that is, from 2018 on, he's been a part of their development system. In the J20, in 46 games, he had 25 goals, 11 assists, good for 36 points. Then you check out his numbers in the playoffs. Pretty solid. 6 games, 3 goals, 1 assist, good for 4 points. And at the World Juniors, the U18, he had 5 points in 6 games, including a goal and an assist in the gold medal winning game. We know Pierre Dorion loves winners, so having a gold medal around your neck, that's going to help him in Dorion's eyes, that's for sure. Let's get into what makes this guy a very interesting prospect. This guy makes a living going towards the net. He is a net front presence that creates chaos, and he drives hard to the net. So that's something the Senators like as well. I think that's something that when we first started covering Zach Ostapchuk, that's something we notice is his drive to the net and really forcing and having a focus on getting that puck right in front of the net and not worrying about taking some bumps and bruises along the way. As I mentioned, when you're 6'2", almost 200 pounds, you've got some size and strength, and he uses that to protect the puck when he's driving towards the lane. So you like to see that. Again, some reports from Jimmy Hamrin from EP. His skating needs a lot of work. His top speed is decent, which when you're a guy that just drives hard to the net, that makes a lot of sense. And that's a really good attribute to have, because you need to make sure you can burst by guys on the wing. But there are some other attributes of his skating that's going to need some work. His mobility, his edges, things like that aren't quite up to snuff. He really gets the puck towards the net, though. Like I mentioned, he makes a living doing that. And very rarely did he have games with no shots when I looked at his game notes. Pettersson's not someone, or Peterson, now I'm flipping back and forth with the pronunciation here. We're going to have to get that figured out. He's not someone that's going to wow you with offensive creativity, though. Like, he's such a blue-collar player that's going to grind hard in the corners for those loose pucks. He's going to force goals in front of the nets with tips, rebounds, deflections, all those kinds of things. And keep in mind, although I said he's not going to wow you with offensive creativity, 25 goals in 46 games is nothing to scoff at. Even if you're looking at a lesser level league in the J20 over in Sweden, that's still pretty impressive. So that's the profile of Oskar Pettersson here. And let's take a look at some of the players that were picked around him. Devin Kaplan, that was a guy that I liked. I kind of profiled him similar to Tyler Boucher. He was picked a few spots ahead of him. So very similar power forward type player. I wonder if he was on their radar, because Kaplan definitely is a guy that had a lot of Sens qualities. And then you guys know I do have a bias towards the Guelph Storm players, as that was my old stomping ground. And I actually started my broadcasting career as a volunteer for the Guelph Storm. So they got a soft spot in my heart. So Danny Zhilkin was still available, and he was picked a few picks after. again, that's where I would have liked to see the Sens go, because especially when they traded 7th overall and 39th overall, you don't have that high-end offensive talent. And Danny Zhilkin was a guy that fell all the way down past 72, and he's someone that had that major offensive creativity, and he can play on a line with really skilled forwards. So I would have preferred they took a swing that way. But again, when you're looking at a guy from Sweden, a power forward that just has a nose for the net and plays that blue collar game, that's very Sens-like player, and someone that, like I mentioned, I think they would have got a lot of viewings when they were scouting Marco Kasper over in Rogel. So for his Sens stars, I actually gave him 2.5 stars here, just because I really think with those first 2 picks, the Sens should have swung on offensive upside, and they did not do that with Nordberg or Pettersson here. So that's where I think, sure, these are fine picks, but I think they could have gone in a different direction and maybe tried to go for guys with size and safer projections a little bit farther down in the draft, when you're not going to have those guys available with the upside like Danny Zhilkin or like Ty Nelson. So that's where just my own personal bias, and through the work that we did covering prospects and doing our rankings, that's where I would have liked to see them go a bit of a different direction than they did. But not bad picks at all, and I think the Sens scouts are going to be very happy that those guys landed in their lap. Now, if you guys are looking at the Sens roster for next season and you're thinking, wow, Alex DeBrincat being added into the roster, into the mix here, they're going to score a lot more goals. Well, you're going to want to head to betonline.net so you can find out all the best odds. I know I'm probably going to be dabbling in the Sens over in more of their games more often than not. And you can find out the latest odds, totals, player performance props, and even where the next fired coach is going to be hired. BetOnline.net is your number one spot for all your sports betting needs and is the trusted online sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just hockey, guys. They got basketball, baseball, golf, UFC, boxing, so much. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the actions. Guys, it's betonline.net where the game starts. All right, so those are the first 2 picks that the Ottawa Senators make. Just to recap, let's take a look here. That was Filip Nordberg at 64th overall and Oskar Pettersson at 72nd overall in the 3rd round. Now, the Sens had another selection in the 3rd round, 87th overall, and they decide to go with another defenseman here. And that's not something that we're surprised by the Ottawa Senators. And before I even start getting into his profile, you can probably guess that he's around 6 feet and right around 200 pounds. And their selection at 87th overall is Tomas Hamara. He's a left shot defenseman, 6 feet, 185 pounds. He was playing in the Czech League, and I would say this was a really good value pick for the Ottawa Senators, and this is a pick that I liked a bunch from them once I did a little bit of research on Hamara here. He had 8 assists in 6 games. Sorry, I lost my spot there. At the U18 World Hockey Championship, even getting All-Star team honor. So that's pretty impressive right off the bat. And if you're looking at his stats in the Czech League, 24 games played, only 2 assists. But then you look at U20, and he had a lot more success there. In the U20 league, in 32 games, he had 6 goals and 19 assists, good for 25 points. And he saw decent minutes in 2 Liga playoff games. Sorry, he was playing over in Liga with Tapara, not in the Czech League. My apologies. He's averaged over 20 minutes a game in the U20 league. They're even playing 30 minutes sometimes. So he was playing big minutes when he was playing in the U20 league. And like I mentioned, this guy was not a reach at all. 87th overall. He was 65th on EP's list. So that's pretty respectable. Lassie Alonen, one of their scouts over in Europe, mentions that he doesn't quite have top end speed, but he's very mobile and agile on his edges. So maybe he's not able to burst by guys like some of the other players we mentioned. but he's going to have a little bit more shiftiness and four-way mobility. He could be a quarterback on a second power play unit. That's kind of his puck skills that he has here. He can join the rush, and he's a decent puck mover. Cam Robinson, a guy we had on our mock draft from EP, mentions how he has above average puck skills. So where Nordberg is a little bit more defensively prone, when you're looking at Hamara here, he's going to have a little bit more of an offensive touch to him, which I think is a nice way to swing for the Ottawa Senators. He's probably the best prospect the Sens got in this draft, honestly. Like, it seemed like he was one of the more well-known guys. A lot of reviews I saw from his scouting reports were very positive. While he doesn't really excel in any one spot, he's a very safe player because he plays a smart game. He's already logging big minutes, and he has some pro experience, like I mentioned, playing over in Liga, not in Czechia, like I thought so. But I think he projects to be a number 5 defenseman. And what I mean by that is he's the better guy on a bottom pair. Like he's the guy that is going to be able to make those risks and play with a little bit more offensive touch on a bottom pair. And I think when he has decent size, like he does at 6 feet, 185 pounds, I think that he can really turn into a nice prospect, even especially if he grows a little bit more. And I think he's going to be a part of second special team units, whether that's a second power play unit or a second penalty kill unit. I think there's definitely some opportunity for Tomas Hamara to make a statement on the special team side of the game here. So when I'm looking at how many stars I gave him, for Tomas Hamara, I gave him 3 stars because I think it was good value at that spot. Like I mentioned, 65 on EP's list. They got him at 87th overall. He's someone that has a lot of projectable skills that can allow him to become a pro defenseman, but he doesn't wow you. So I didn't really feel like they took a swing on any upside here. They just took kind of another decently sized left shot defenseman, which, hey, nothing wrong with having a lot of solid defensemen in your prospect pipeline, but I wouldn't mind trying to take a bit of a swing on some bigger attributes here. But I do like Tomas Hamara, and I'm excited to see how things go. And it'll be interesting to see where he ends up playing if now that he's in the Sens organization here. Moving on to the next pick, the 4th round, 104th overall selection. And it is Stephen Halliday. Stephen Halliday played with the Fighting Saints in the USHL, and look at this. He's got some size. Shocker. Not only some size, a lot of size. This guy is 6'4", 209 pounds, left shot, and he plays center. Now, the reason, maybe you're like, wow, 6'4", 209 pounds, that's a big kid. He is a 2002 birthday, so this was his last year of draft eligibility. He is committed to Ohio State next season. That'll be interesting to see him in the NCAA. And he won the USHL Gentleman of the Year award. So the Ottawa Senators keeping with good character players and trying to keep that culture intact as they draft Stephen Halliday here. EP was very high on his puck handling skills and hockey IQ, even calling him a genius in a few different spots. So that's very impressive. Like, they don't usually use hyperboles too often. So for Mitch Brown to rave about his creativity with the puck gives me a lot of reasons to be optimistic. He's able to use that 6'4", 209 pound frame to protect the puck. You love seeing guys that have that size and aren't afraid to use it to give them advantages against their opponents. And he has the confidence to deep through opponents and set up his line mates. Now, as EP is, they focus a lot on the skating. So I know I said Mitch Brown loved his play with the puck, but almost every report that I saw Mitch Brown do, he ends it off saying the skating is going to hold him back. Skating's not good enough, needs to work on skating. It was always kind of, he had genius plays with the puck here and there, but if his skating doesn't improve, it's kind of all for naught here. And I did watch some highlights of him on YouTube with the Fighting Saints, and he does look a little slow out there. He's lumbering out there, but when he gets the puck on his stick, like he was toe dragging guys, he was passing it to himself off the boards and then getting around a chip and chase style. And he's just so creative that even though he doesn't get it done with his foot speed, he can outsmart guys and outmuscle them too with that big frame. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he does in the NCAA. He was older and stronger than most players in the USHL. That allowed him to put up big points. I don't think I mentioned his point total, so it's very impressive. 62 games played, 35 goals, 60 assists, good for 95 points in the USHL. So definitely at a point now where he's been there a couple of years and he is dominating. Yeah, this is his fourth year actually in the USHL, and his point totals, you're looking at 34, 38, 48, and then 95. So he really exploded onto the scene this year, as he should when you're that much older and bigger than a lot of these players. He was a plus 29, and in only 2 playoff games, he had 5 assists. So definitely time for Stephen Halliday to move on here. I can't wait to see if the NCAA will really stagnate his development here. Like you mentioned, the skating is going to need a lot of work. There's great skaters in college. I think he's going to need at least 2 seasons in college. And he's going to Ohio State, so a decent program. And if we're looking at value for picks around him, at this point in the draft, 104th overall, there was not many guys from Ross and I's 64 top-ranked guys. But there was one, Mats Lindgren, and he was a defenseman I actually liked, and we had him ranked 56th overall. Now, would I want the Sens to take another left-hand D after they've taken quite a few already and already have a decent amount in the prospect pipeline? No, so I'm okay. They didn't go with Lindgren here, and I like the fact that they went with Halliday. I know he's an overager, and I know sometimes prospect analysts, they kind of scoff at that. Like, why would you use a 4th-round pick on an overager that might have just fallen to you or you could have just signed? If he's the Sens guy, I don't mind this pick. 95 points in the USHL, that's pretty damn good. So I think he projects as a top 6 AHL guy. The puck play is there, and you can see it in the highlights, but when you're 6'4" and over 200 pounds, if you're such a terrible skater, it's going to be very hard for you to keep up as you keep on progressing. Like going from the USHL to the NCAA is going to be interesting. Then NCAA to the AHL is going to be a big change. So I really don't think he's going to be able to make it all the way to the pros here. But you know what? I like that the Sens took a swing on creativity, offensive potential here, because they usually don't do that, even if it was an overager. I like the idea here. So for Stephen Halliday, I give him 3 stars. Solid pick, good offensive upside, but the skating is definitely going to be an issue, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can overcome that with some time. All right, this is now probably the most interesting pick the Sens made all day, and another classic Sens pick, but nonetheless, I think they got some good value here as well. And in the 5th round, 136th overall, they select from the Hamilton Bulldogs, Jorian Donovan. And now if you're thinking Donovan, I recognize that name. Yeah, former Sens, Sean Donovan, and player development coach Sean Donovan. That is his son. And you start looking and you see a lot of comparables. 6'2", 181 pounds, and a hard compete level. He's a left shot, left defenseman. In 64 games with the Hamilton Bulldogs, he had 3 goals, 19 assists, good for 22 points. And then in 13 playoff games, he had a goal and 2 assists, good for 3 points. Now, he comes with some decent pedigree too. He was the 6th overall pick in the 2020 OHL draft. So definitely that's a big deal. And the Hamilton Bulldogs were very high on him. He won an OHL championship with Hamilton. Again, Pierre Dorion likes winners. So right away, you can highlight that for him. EP ranked him 73rd on their guide. So you talk about value here. A 5th-round pick, 136th overall, and EP was pretty high on him here, and for a lot of good reasons. He had average ratings in all skills except better skating and better puck handling. So usually when you get down to the 5th round, you're kind of hoping guys have one or two better than average skills like Donovan with the skating and puck handling. But usually there's a downside, like what we talked about with Halliday. The skating is so bad that it kind of weighs them down here. That's not the case with Jorian Donovan here. And Mitch Brown had a lot of positive things to say about his skating. So you can tell this is why he was ranked so high by EP, because they love the skating. He can join the rush, but he doesn't always do it enough or at the right times. But this is still a very young prospect. You got to keep that in mind. An 04 birthday, and he had been playing. This is just his first year in the OHL, playing with the Canada Lasers a couple years ago and Upper Canada Cyclones. So he's no stranger to the Ottawa area, that's for sure. And playing in Hamilton, that's a great landing spot for him, especially 6th overall. He plays a smart game defensively and competes hard. Obviously, you're going to compete hard when Sean Donovan's your dad, that's for sure. Look, I think there's solid potential for Donovan. I think he's a responsible, smart, hardworking, two-way defenseman with good skating and size. If you can combine responsibility, good skating, and size together, you have a chance to be a decent defenseman if you put the work in. And I think he'll likely spend 2 seasons in junior. Probably 2 more seasons with the Hamilton Bulldogs would be a great thing for him. Now, I know some people, they roll their eyes at the friends and family aspects of the Ottawa Senators. And you know what? Maybe that's not how a lot of other teams operate, but I love it, honestly. Like, building a culture is so important to have a good hockey club. When Alex DeBrincat spoke to the media today, he mentioned how Brady called him, Thomas Chabot called him, obviously the leaders of the organization. You love to see that. But he mentioned that they were all talking about how great the locker room culture is, and that he's someone, DeBrincat's someone that's going to come in and fit in. And a big part of that is drafting and developing guys that are going to want to be there. Sean Donovan's kid is going to want to be there. He's going to work hard. And guys that can all get along. I mean, it sounds funny to say, but it's just like any other working culture. You want to have good people, high character guys, as Pierre Dorian likes to say. So if it means drafting Sean Donovan's son with the 136th overall pick, that's fine. I don't mind that at all. And this wasn't a reach at all. I don't think anyone was out there being like the Sens reached just to get an employee's kid here. That's not the situation. Even if he wasn't Sean Donovan's son, this is a guy the Sens would target. Over 6 feet, 181 pounds, left defenseman, smart, hardworking. That's typically their MO for prospects. So I like this pick a lot. I think this is probably, I mentioned how earlier, Tomas Hamara was the best prospect they got out of here. I still think Hamara might be ahead of Donovan. However, Donovan was the best value, in my opinion, because I think there's a lot of upside here. And for a 5th round pick, that's a great selection by the Ottawa Senators. So welcome to the Sens organization, Jorian Donovan. Now continuing in the 5th round, 143rd overall, it's Cameron O'Neill. 18 years old, 6'1", 194 pounds. He's a right shot, right winger. And he comes from a spot that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of, and that's the Mount Charles Academy. It's a U18 spot. And do you like points? Well, Cameron O'Neill at Mount Charles can definitely put a smile on your face then. Listen to these stats, guys. 62 games played. 57 goals. You heard that right. 57 goals. I did not mess that one up. 76 assists. Good for 133 points. Let that sink in. 133 points in 62 games. Wow. Now, of course, that's at a much lesser competition level. And he did also get a cup of coffee in the USHL with the Tri-City Storm. 4 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. Not bad at all. And if you're wondering about the Mount Charles program, Brian Berard and Brian Boucher are both players that came out of that program. So definitely some NHL players coming out of there. And he is committed, Cameron O'Neill is committed to UMass So he's going to be heading to the NCAA. He was a play driver in the U18 program, with 133 points. That makes a lot of sense. Mitch Brown applauded his play away from the puck when he went to the USHL, which that's something that really impressed me, because when you're a guy that's lighting it up in a lesser league, 133 points in 62 games, I thought he'd be trying to play hero when he goes up to the USHL. I thought he'd be a guy that's getting the puck on his stick, beaver tapping for those passes in open spots. But it wasn't that he was just trying to force offense. He could play really well away from the puck, and he can play well in transition. Mitch Brown mentioned how sometimes he would get passes on his backhand, off the boards, in his feet, and he would be able to pick those up in stride and keep on going. So that's pretty impressive for a guy that was bouncing up to a higher competition. Being in the lesser levels, though, they did cause him to have some bad habits, like he's forcing risky passes. He's trying to make passes that aren't there. He's not hitting guys in stride, stuff like that. Just things that when your opponent's defensemen in other leagues aren't as quick, as big, as experienced, you can make those risks. And usually if they don't work out, at least it's not going to be a big turnover going the other way. You can have a little bit more of a leash in those lesser leagues. So that makes sense, and that's something with time he's going to be able to work out. He's only 18 years old, so he's got a lot of time, and he's going to be playing at a decent program in UMass. So that'll be good for his development for sure. I kind of wish he would have another season in the USHL. I mean, like I mentioned, he only had 4 games, so it'd be nice to let him develop there a bit more. But he certainly has some offensive upside, and that's going to translate, will it translate, I should say, to higher levels. That's where it remains to be seen how it's going to go for Cameron O'Neill. So an interesting prospect for sure. I give him 3 stars here because he put up big points. There's a lot of upside. Sure, it's a project, but it's a 5th round pick, and they swung on offensive upside here. And Mitch Brown's comments about his play away from the puck, that gave me some peace of mind knowing he's not just all an offensive player. So decent pick here. Now we move on to their next pick. Finally, guys, we're a hashtag goalie friendly show, and the Ottawa Senators in the 5th round with the 151st overall pick select Kevin Reidler, a massive goalie playing over in Sweden. And he listened to his dimensions here, as this is a guy that is 6'5", 176 pounds, playing over in Sweden. I'm just pulling up his EP page here. And on his EP page, actually, he's listed at 6'6", 201 pounds. So this is a big goalie, and the Sens, they love their big goalies. As we know, they selected the Great Dane Mads Søgaard. So that's not a surprise at all. I was hoping they would go with Hugo Havlid, the twin brother of another prospect that was selected, and a bit of a shorter guy, but he put up good numbers. But they didn't go that direction. Hugo's still available. Maybe they'll scoop him up later, though. Kevin Reidler, let's get back to him. He was playing with the ALK J20 team. I'm not familiar with them over in Sweden, but not a lot to go off here, as he's a guy that was picked later in the draft. You're looking at, he got a couple of J20 games, 3 games, 4.33 goals against average, .847 save percentage. So not great, but when he was playing in the J18 national, 3.13 goals against average, and a .910 save percentage. So that's much better. And he had a winning record at 7-4. He did get a couple playoff games there, 2 playoff games, 3.05 goals against average, .922 save percentage. So the save percentage is definitely something to look at there. 910 and a 922 in the J18 National League. So not too bad numbers there. Honestly, there's not a whole lot that I have on this guy. Sens Prospects, he had, follow him on Twitter at Sens Prospects. Of course, he had one highlight of him, a nice save on a shootout attempt, and the boys were buzzing when he made the glove save in the celly. He does have some bloodlines. His grandfather, Hakan Wickberg, he played a decent amount of time in Sweden. So definitely there's something that you can go off there. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot on Kevin Reidler. We're going to try to do some deeper dives on him later on when Ross gets back and when we can find some more info on him. But just wanted to make sure we covered him because he is attendee, and you guys know we're a hashtag goalie friendly show. Moving on to the next pick, the 6th round, 168th overall selection for the Ottawa Senators, and that is Theo Wallberg, another defenseman here. So the Ottawa Senators selected Filip Nordberg, Tomas Hamara, Jorian Donovan, and now Theo Wallberg. That's their 4th defenseman that they selected. And another Swedish guy, another guy with size, 6'3", 187 pounds. And nothing, like I mentioned before, nothing wrong with having a lot of bigger defensemen, that's for sure. And he was playing with Skellefteå in the J20 League in 46 games. He had 2 goals, 21 assists, good for 23 points. And he was a +9. He got 2 playoff games, no points there though. And interesting move here as he's going to go to the Fighting Saints. That's the 2nd player drafted by the Ottawa Senators going to the Fighting Saints in the Fighting Saints, in the USHL next year. And then the year after that, he's committed to Ohio State University. So another Sens prospect that's going to be going to Ohio State. So I know for Ross and I would love seeing Sens prospects being bunched up in one area. It makes covering them a lot easier. I don't have a whole lot of information on Theo Wallberg at the moment. Again, that's a guy we're going to try to take a deeper dive into, try to get some intel from scouts and some of our guests on our shows to try to get some more info for you. But Theo Wallberg, big Swedish left shot defenseman, drafted by the Ottawa Senators, 168th overall. And the final selection for the Ottawa Senators in the 2022 draft, the 7th round, 206th overall, is Tyson Dyck. He's a centerman, 5'11", 166 pounds, played in the BCHL with Cranbrook. Cranbrook, beautiful area. If you haven't been there, he plays with the Cranbrook Bucks. That's where the Winnipeg Ice, the Kootenay Ice, used to play in Cranbrook. So definitely that town's used to having some hockey going on there. And in 54 games, he had 34 goals, 41 assists, good for 75 points. Those are some pretty impressive point totals. Now, the BCHL is a bit of a lesser league, but they've been having a nice boost lately. In the past 5 years, there's been some decent players drafted out of the BCHL. So it's not a league to really scoff at, that's for sure. And then in 6 playoff games, he had 4 goals, 1 assist, good for 5 points. So he was able to keep production going in the playoffs. He's committed to UMass, yet another player at UMass. So the Senators, they're doing Ross and I some big favors here. Not a whole lot more I can tell you about Tyson Dyck at the moment, but it's nice to see that he's putting up big points in the BCHL because that's pretty solid. And UMass, another great program in the NCAA. So that concludes all of the draft picks. I'm over 40 minutes here covering the 9 new Ottawa Senators from the 2022 draft. So just to recap, let's take a look at who they selected. 64th overall, Filip Nordberg. 72nd overall, Oskar Pettersson. 87th overall, Tomas Hamara. 104th overall, Stephen Halliday. 136th overall, Jorian Donovan. 143rd overall, Cameron O'Neill. 151st overall, Kevin Reidler. 168th overall, Theo Wallberg. And 206th overall, Tyson Dyck. So that is your new Ottawa Senators draft class for the 2022 NHL Draft. Welcome to all those players to the Ottawa Senators organization. I didn't see any kind of hateful comments or people on Twitter being negative about picks. So that was nice for a change. I'm sure if they kept 7th and 39th overall, we might have had some of that. But that didn't happen this year, so that was refreshing. The Senators have Alex DeBrincat. Honestly, I would say the Senators could have drafted players we've never heard of and with no upside for the rest of the draft, and acquiring Alex DeBrincat would have been fine, and they would have got a great grade from me for this draft, because for them to get a player of that caliber while only giving up 7th and 39th and then a 3rd round pick later on down the road, who cares? That's incredible value. And like I mentioned, there were some players here that I really liked and that I think are going to have some upside. No one's going to step into the NHL next year, obviously. I would say probably not even a year after that. We're looking 2-3 years down the road for a lot of these prospects, but the Ottawa Senators are in a position where they can be patient. They can use development coaches like Sean Donovan to help these guys move along. And if the guys are prospect or projects, that's fine. Working on skating, working on being smarter defensively, all these kinds of things. There's no rush for any of these guys. So I'm excited to have finally finished the draft. It's been a lot of work for Ross and I, especially with Ross away during the draft. This is the busiest period for us in the offseason, that's for sure. But it's been a blast covering it. I'm so happy for all these new kids coming into the organization. Thanks for following along and listening to this long solo episode. 46 minutes around is where we're at here. So thank you for following along, guys. For myself, Brandon Pillar, and Ross Levitan, this has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.